OK，我们就
他开始
他开始录了哈。
，yes，
我们是每星期一跟三上课哈。Live stream on King On channel on YouTube and the recording available after the class. I need to announce one thing before the class, which is this. Okay. I told you last time or the time before that our next class, we will be talking about the movie Gandhi. And I have been working on that for a while, including in the past week. However, today when I tried to watch the movie, it's gone. It's no longer available. So it becomes private. It's not a free movie. So, and I was able to find one which is a 8-part thing. I watched everyone. They look very good if you continue watching them, but each one was only like 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So it's not the whole movie. So we're not going to be able to watch that movie in order to know what it's about. So I'm changing the movie title to The Best Years of Our Lives. So next week, in 2 weeks, on August the 20th, we'll be talking about the movie The Best Years of Our Lives. It's a contemporary story, not a historical story, but it is about life after the Second World War in this country, after the soldiers all came home, and the difficulties and the social problems and so on that they encounter and how they deal with them. That's a very good movie. It's 2 hours and 50 minutes long. I'm sorry if you watched Gandhi already and we cannot talk about that movie. So make sure you watch this movie. You can just search by the name of the title of this movie and find it on YouTube. And it is free right now. Okay. And we have 2 weeks to work on that. Today, we're going to talk about the song by Simon and Garfunkel. It's called Old Friends. And I paired it with the Chinese poem, a Tang Dynasty Liu Yuxi. He wrote this poem, which was very famous, especially the last 2 lines. He was responding to another poem that Bai Juyi wrote to him about being old, because they were lifelong friends for many, many years. And the Bai Juyi was feeling sad or depressed because he was getting old. And the Liu Yuxi tried to encourage him to cheer him up. Okay. And we are going to talk about Irving Thalberg, the octopus, and the fossil, and among other things. And here is the list of vocabulary. We're not going to go over this list right now because we're going to go over the entire list one by one. And before that happens, I'm going to mention a few things related to what we talked about last time. Last time I mentioned Ingrid Bergman, and we talked quite a lot about her, and I was not able to remember this man he married to, her second husband. She married 3 times, and later they divorced. And this man, Roberto Rossellini, is an Italian director. He married 4 times, twice before Ingrid Bergman and once afterwards. This marriage is very scandalous because you can see that they have 3 children, and the boy, I guess it's one lying at the bottom, that boy was born before she was divorced from her first husband. That's why it becomes so scandalous. However, she got a divorce and they got married, and they had a few years of very happy marriage, but she was under huge stress because her first husband would not let her see their child. Their child is Pia Lindstrom. And she was really suffering because of that. In addition to that, the entire world was against her because they looked down upon a woman who would have an extramarital relationship, and the world was just not ready for such behavior at that time. That's why she was not able to be in any American movies for a length of time. And later on, she was able to return to make movies in Hollywood, but the best time of her year were gone. So you look at this picture, you have great sympathy for this beautiful woman, and you can understand how much she suffered. She had several children. She had 4 children. The first one, Pia Lindstrom, was on New York City as a news anchor when I lived there. We often saw her on the news. And in this picture, there are, I believe, 2 daughters. And one of them is called Isabella Rossellini, and she became a movie star and was in many quite noticeable, very good movies she was in. She was also beautiful. All her children are beautiful because she was so beautiful, I guess. So that's one thing I forgot about the Rossellini's last name. And the Rossellini, we in Seattle, we had, how do you call that? A governor of Washington State whose last name was Rossellini. So there was a sign here and there mentioning, for example, a bridge across the Lake Washington was called the Rossellini Bridge because of that. And we also talked a lot about Bernard Shaw, and he is an Irish playwright. And here I named the 6 famous Irish playwrights, modern Irish playwrights. And the oldest, the one that was born the earliest was Oscar Wilde. He died in 1900, and all the rest of them were a little later than he was. Oscar Wilde was tremendously popular all over the world, and he died miserably penniless. It's a huge tragedy. If you can compare the severity of tragedies, I would say few could compete with Oscar Wilde, Huang. Here we had Oscar Wilde, who died in 1900. So, of course, he was never a Nobel Prize winner because Nobel Prize did not exist at that time. But among these 6 people, 2 of them, the 4th one, W.B. Yeats, and the last one, Samuel Beckett, both won Nobel Prize. And of course, Bernard Shaw was also an Irish playwright, and he was a Nobel Prize winner. When you talk about Irish writers or playwrights, you can say there are different kinds of Irish playwrights. Some of them left Ireland at a young age and became rich and famous as an English writer in England, in London probably. And some of them stay put and suffer the poverty and the discrimination and hardship. Those are John Millington Synge and Sean Casey. They talk, when they write, they talk about the misery they experienced. However, when you read or saw the play of Oscar Wilde or George Bernard Shaw, it's entirely about the English society. That's their adoptive country. And James Joyce is straddling in between. He is mostly an Irish citizen. I would say he was, yes. But he was so famous that he became in a different world. He's very much English too, but he never left his roots. As to Samuel Beckett, he is a modern man. I mean, he was entirely a 20th century man, and his writings are, you can say he was part of the theater of the absurd. Many modern styled plays that are not the realistic, you can say that. And he also won a Nobel Prize. In Seattle, I've seen a play written by Samuel Beckett. It's about totally weird things, things that do not happen. That story is about a horde of rhinoceros, 犀牛, running in the city everywhere. Of course, such things never happened, but that's why it's a theater of the absurd. It's not realistic, weird stories. Okay, this is I want to add a word here. It's called theater of the absurd. 荒谬剧, and there are quite a lot of French and English playwrights who write strange stories. Another person we talked about a lot last time was Orson Welles. In fact, we talked about Orson Welles' Citizen Kane for quite a while. And this is a picture I took in Morocco, and this city is called Usariya. And Orson Welles was here making a movie, which was a Shakespearean story, Othello. And because Othello was a black general, so Orson Welles made the movie. Part of the movie was made in Morocco. And this is a square in Usariya, and it's named after him. That's why I'm showing you this picture. It's called the Orson Welles Plaza. And this is a poster for the movie Othello, which was made by Orson Welles. He made a few movies that are quite notable, but because of his duel with William Randolph Hearst, the big media mogul, so he was really boycotted by the entire media industry. All the newspapers belonging to Hearst would not talk about him or advertise his movies. So he was suffering all his life. And this is a Shakespearean play called Othello. It's one of Shakespeare's 4 great tragedies. And it's about a beautiful white aristocratic woman who falls in love with a heroic general, a black general. And this is about the general listened to other people's rumors and thought this he could not have he didn't trust the wife because of the rumors that he heard, and eventually he killed his wife in bed. That is a great tragedy. It is a Black man in a white world, and even though he's very, very great and admired, he is mentally not quite confident of himself. That's why he was listening to some bad people around him. Okay. This is a movie that Orson Welles made, and on location in several countries. It was filmed in Morocco, in Wassaria, and Venice in Italy, Tuscany in Italy, and Rome. These are all places in Italy, and at Scalera Studio in Rome. So he did lots of filming in different countries when he was making this movie. And when I talk about Wassaria, I thought about another movie that was made there, and this movie is called Hannah. Hannah was not a famous movie, and it's recent enough, 2012, and not too many people heard about it, but I've seen this, and this girl, she was probably not quite 20, I guess, and her name is Saoirse Ronan. Here's the name. You look at it and you have difficulty trying to pronounce it because she's Irish, and you should pronounce it differently because it's not English, and you would call her Saoirse Ronan. And if I tell you about her, you probably remember that you've seen her before, because she was in the movie called The Atonement with Keira Knightley. And I couldn't come up with the name, even though I know him quite well. Anyway, if you have seen that movie, which I'm sure many of you have seen it, it's called Atonement. The Atonement. She was just outstanding. She was 13 years old when she was in that movie, and she was nominated for an Oscar because she was so good in that movie. And this is before she turned 20. She was in this movie, which was not very famous, but the director was the same. Joe Wright did the movie The Atonement. And Eric Bana played her father, and Kate Blanchett. They were CIA operatives, and this very young girl was trained by her father to be a killer. So this story is about a killer, and the CIA, as represented by Kate Blanchett, was trying to kill her. Okay, here I have two pictures of her. She's very sweet, and she has, of course, since then became an adult and was in many, many, many movies, and many of them were very, very famous, and she was nominated for an Oscar and many other awards multiple times. These are some, maybe a third of the movie she made, or maybe a quarter of the movie she made, because she was in many very good movies. She was 13 years old when she played the younger sister in The Atonement. And she was in Grand Budapest Hotel as a supporting actress. However, she was the leading actress in all the rest of these movies. In Brooklyn, playing a young immigrant in Brooklyn, she was nominated for an Oscar, I believe. And this was when she played Lady Bird and maybe Little Women, and maybe even Ammonite. She was repeatedly nominated because she was so good. So there was Brooklyn and Lady Bird. Seagull is Anton Chekhov play, and it's adapted into movies numerous times, and this was a recent one. Mary, Queen of Scots, she was playing Mary, Queen of Scots, against the younger queen, who was Elizabeth I, played by Margot something. Okay. Little Women was made into movies many times, and this one is a very recent one in 2019. It has a female director, Gerta. I can't. I am having difficulty remembering names. Gerta or Gerwish or something. That's her name. Ammonite was a period piece with Kate Winslet playing a female archaeologist. Now let's start with our vocabulary. The first one is not an English word. It is Liu Xiang. I just want to talk a little bit about Liu Xiang. He and his son are both very renowned scholars, and together they composed, or they edited Bielu. Bielu is not a book that you write, or it's not a history book or something, but it's a list of books that were in print. They spent lots of time, 20 years, he and his son, Liu Xiang and Liu Xin. And some of these books were either written by him or edited by him or commented by him, but this particular one, Bielu, is not such a book. It is a list of books, a publication categorized list of books in existence. And later on, they rearranged it and added more things and so on. It becomes Qi Lue. And when Ban Gu did his great work, Han Shu, the history of the Han Dynasty, he in particular chose Qi Lue to be included in his history, called the Han Shu Yi Wen Zhi. This is extraordinary work, and very early compared to other countries to have such detailed list of all the books in existence. So the two of them are really, they should be commended for their great work and innovative ideas. And this book is called the Qi Lue. Okay, and last time when I talked about him, I mentioned Chunqiu Fanlu, but that was a mistake. Chunqiu Fanlu was written by Dong Zhongshu. All of them were people under the reign of Han Wudi. So I got confused. Let's start with the first real word, which is Mogul. This has several words that are similar to it, synonyms, like a magnet, or tycoon, or baron, B-A-R-O-N. These are words that are used to describe a person who is very powerful within a certain circle, usually in an industry. And when we talked about this word because we were talking about William Randolph Hearst. Hearst was considered a media mogul. That means that he is a giant in the industry of news. He is in the publication industry and in the news, the newspaper industry. He bought lots of established newspapers in many towns. He owns hundreds of newspapers all over the country, which together controls the thinking, the news, or the money in the whole country. So he's a very, very big person, having huge influence and knowing lots of powerful or wealthy people. Under such circumstances, we would call this person a mogul. In our time, newspaper is not really a money-making business. So there aren't so many moguls. During William Randolph Hearst's time, you could say that Pulitzer was another newspaper mogul. But right now, we can only say just about Rupert Murdoch is the only person in the news industry that is as powerful and as influential and as wealthy as William Randolph Hearst. Okay, we'll come back to this first. So let's finish this word, which is mogul. And it means a person of power and rank in any sphere, especially in industry. So we just mentioned the industry called the media industry, and it can be other industries such as this one, rubber. For quite a while after cars were invented, we needed a lot of rubber to make wheels for the car. Okay, so lots of people were making huge amount of money in Brazil. This is a picture of the Amazon River. It's huge and hot and lots of land. And those people who made a lot of money by producing rubber for tire making, they are called rubber baron, because they are almost like a royalty or an aristocratic person, 像一个贵族一样，有钱有势哈，所以叫做 rubber baron. And later on, we also use baron to describe other big people in industry. Okay, so these people are called rubber baron, and we also can use the word magnate or tycoon. And let's go to Rupert Murdoch. He's pretty old, but he's still alive, and he divorced his Chinese wife. He's from Australia. His father owns a small newspaper in a small town in Australia, and he made it bigger and bigger, and eventually he has huge control of the newspaper and the TV and the publication industries in the UK, Australia, as well as in America, and maybe a few other places, but he's a dominating figure in UK and America, USA, and Australia. And if you have heard of Fox News, you know how powerful he is. He owns Fox News, and he owns Sky News in Australia, and he owns a newspaper, and he's also considered an investor because he has so much money. He invests in other things in addition to news media. He has a net worth of $21.7 billion and is the 31st richest person in the United States. And another word related to mogul was tycoon. And when you mention tycoon, you would think of this book, the last novel written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's called The Last Tycoon. Fitzgerald was famous for writing quite a few great novels. Of them, the most popular one is probably The Great Gatsby. It was made into a movie more than once. I've seen two of them. And this one is made from his last book, which he did not finish. However, a famous English playwright whose name is Harold Pinter, he wrote a screenplay based on that book called The Last Tycoon, and it was made into a movie. And it's about a very, very wealthy person called Monroe Starr, who was forever in love with his childhood's lover, and he could not forget this girl, Daisy, and they were from the countryside in the South, but they separately came to New York City and became rich and famous. Of course, the girl married another person who's not as rich as, yes, we're talking about The Great Gatsby, yeah. Okay, let's talk about The Last Tycoon. It is about one person who is rich and famous and very talented and powerful, and he considered that person to be the last of such giants. And yeah, I've seen this movie too. He was played by, Monroe Starr was the name of this last tycoon, and he was played by, I can't come up with that. Robert De Niro. Okay, Robert De Niro, when he was young, he looks like a very spiritual person, but he became more and more ill-educated, like a thug. He played too many Italian mobster figures, so as he aged, he became he was no longer enabled to play those high-class people. He became a regular thug. We say thug is a THUG, is a person like a mafia assassin or whatever. Okay, but when he was playing in The Last Tycoon, Robert De Niro looked quite handsome and smart and intellectual, you can say that. And this is a movie directed by Elia Kazan, who was from Greece, and he was quite famous too, and produced by Sam Spiegel. The two of them worked together to make the movie that on the last line, the highlighted in red. The title is called On the Waterfront. It is translated into Chinese as 岸上风云. It had, Marlon Brando in it with Eva Marie Saint and Rod Steiger. Yeah, that's another movie. Okay, let's talk about The Last Tycoon. It's got several famous actors: Robert De Niro, Tony Curtis, Robert Mitchum, Jack Nicholson, Donald Pleasence, that's an English one, and Jean Moreau is French, Teresa Russell. This is about a young movie producer, and it's based on a real person whose name is Irving Thalberg, and that's the name you just saw in my slide that says today's topic. We're going to talk about this person for a while, and his name is Irving Thalberg. And he's a young man because he died at age 37. And he's considered a boy wonder. He was a nobody, and he had very few skills. He wanted to get a job, so he went to night school to learn to type. And then he was hired by a movie producer to be an assistant, a secretary. So I would just assume that he was maybe 18 or 20 years old. But before he was put in charge of MGM at age 26. He already produced, I think, 300 movies, and many of them were very, very good movies and famous, and created many famous stars by him. So he is an amazing producer. He has ideas and he has skills. He was able to get different talented people together to make the movie that are not only great, but were commercially successful. The magic word in the movie industry is it has to sell. No matter how good the movie is, it has to sell in order to become famous and money making. So he made a lot of big profitable movies and created numerous stars under him. And to the whole world, people watched his American movies and imagined this land of opportunity, a land of, wealth and happiness. He created this image that presented to the whole world what America was. This is amazing. Brimming with vitality and rooted in democracy and the personal freedom. That's what his movie was all about. So he was born in 1899 and lived to be 36 years old. He had a heart condition since he was young, and he thought he would die of a heart attack any day. And indeed he did when he was only 37. So before he was 26, I just said that he made 300 movies, including Grand Hotel with Greta Garbo, China Seas with Clark Gable and Jean Harlow. Yeah, I guess so. A Night at the Opera, that's a Marx Brothers movie. It's a comedy. I hope you've heard of Marx Brothers. There are several brothers that made a lot of funny movies. They're just very, very, very funny, especially Groucho. And the Mutiny on the Bounty, which is a story about a mutiny of an English ship in Tahiti, okay? And that story was made into movies many, many times. I've seen at least 3 of them. And Camille, the one he made was one of the earlier ones, not the first 2, maybe the 3rd one, but it's the first one that most people have seen. It has Clark Gable and Charlton, not Huston, Charles Lawton, okay. Camille is, again, Greta Garbo, is Cha Camille. And The Good Earth. The Good Earth is the movie about China. It's based on the Pearl Buck's story. Pearl Buck's is an American woman who grew up in a missionary family in China. So she wrote about Chinese poor farmers, and this is called a Da Di. And she was a Nobel Prize winner in literature as well. So Irving Thalberg made all these movies before age 26 and created Greta Garbo and Clark Gable and who else? Okay, these are all great movie stars created by him, okay? Then he befriends Meyer, I think it's Meyer. I have a picture of this. Louis B. Mayer, okay. Louis B. Mayer is on the right-hand side in the picture. And on the left-hand side, it's Irving Thalberg with his wife, Norma Shearer, who who was a movie star too. She was very pretty, but he died at age 37. So he became a good friend of Louis B. Mayer, and together they created a company called MGM. 就我们叫做米高梅哈，Metro Goldwyn Mayer. Mayer is the last M, and the middle word is Goldwyn is another person, and the first name is Metro, is a company, I suppose. So they combined 3 big movie making, producing companies to create MGM, and Irving Thalberg was in control of this huge company. And since then, after he was 26, he made another 400 movies before he died at age 37. So that's an amazing person. Okay, 400 movies. There are other things about him and the movie industry. He introduced horror movies. Before that, nobody thought about making horror movies, and it is apparently a huge money maker. He thought about that, And he also co-authored the production code, which is a self-disciplinary rules the industry created to police themselves, because they have such huge power to influence the societies and the culture and in fact, the civilization all over the world. They decided to have a certain basic standard so that they do not abuse their power. So he was one of the person who wrote the codes. He created numerous stars and groomed them. If you have a dog and you take the dog to a groomer, then the groomer is like a hairdresser. The groomer would cut the hair of the dog and make the dog pretty. That's a word called groom, G-R-O-O-M, which is the same word as the bridegroom. 新郎也叫做 groom, and the groom as a verb is to make something presentable, attractive looking, and so on. That's called groom. So he groomed a whole lot of new stars, including Lon Chaney or Cheney. That's called, he was called a man of 1,000 faces because he could do makeup and totally change his look, especially for the worse, to make him look horrible or terribly terrifying. Greta Garbo was probably one of the most beautiful women in the world. I think he came from Sweden or some country in
Sweden.
Sweden, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Lionel Barrymore, that was from the Barrymore family. That's a huge family with lots of movie stars. The latest would be Drew Barrymore, and you have John Barrymore, and this is Lionel Barrymore, Joan Crawford, Clark Gable, Jean Harlow, Spencer Tracy, and then Norma Shearer, who married Irving Thalberg. So I have a picture that I just showed you with Irving Thalberg on the left-hand side and his wife in the middle, and Louis B. Mayer. Mayer is, of course, almost a father figure and liked him very much, but he knew that Thalberg would die at a young age, so he forbid Thalberg to date his many daughters, and the Thalberg respect that and never dated any of his daughters. And he married a movie star. Well, I think he probably made this girl a movie star and married her. And she was in quite a few famous movies. However, her name is very similar to another actress, so I sometimes confuse them. And that girl is called Moira Shearer. They have the same last name. And I've seen this actress in the movie called The Red Shoes when I was little. Here is a picture from the movie called The Barretts of Wimpole Street, with the story of which I mentioned before last year, probably. It's about Elizabeth Browning. Well, of course, she was Elizabeth Barrett to begin with, but then she fell in love with Robert Browning, and they got married, and they eloped, or she just ran away from home, said goodbye to her father, because the father was too controlling, and partly because she was very sickly. She was very sick since she was very little. That's why the father would become very protective of Elizabeth Browning, or Elizabeth Barrett. This is Frederick March and Norma Shearer in the movie The Barretts of Wimpole Street. And the next time we're going to talk about the movie The Best Years of Our Lives. It's the story about three soldiers coming back home after World War II, and the older one, the more established, higher ranked person, was played by Frederick March. He was quite a big movie star for quite a while, but later on, of course, it was too long ago, I suppose, but I have seen quite a few of his movies. So the magic of Irving Thalberg is that he could compare quality with commercial success, which is very important for the movie industry. And he was credited with bringing his artistic aspirations in line with the demands of audiences. You would think it's difficult because people, generally speaking, have poor taste. They want to have some low-class fun, but an artist in the movie industry sometimes would like to insist on quality and substance, and that would be in contrast with the goal of making money. So Irving Thalberg is very talented in bringing quality and commercial success in one product. After he died, Oscar Award created an award called the Irving Thalberg Memorial Award. It is not an annual thing. Sometimes they would give out an award to a producer who proved to be able to create lots of work that consistently are of high quality. I bet you have heard about it during Oscar award shows. Sometimes they would give this to a producer, not to anyone else, just to a producer in memory of Irving Thalberg. And when I talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald, he was of an earlier time, as his stories would probably make you be aware, like The Great Gatsby. That was a time in probably the 20s and the 30s of last century. And there were great writers and the playwrights like Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Faulkner, and also singers, dancers, other types of artists during that time. So I would actually, last time I already mentioned there was such a movie by Woody Allen quite recently in 2011. It's called Midnight in Paris. It's about a contemporary couple American tourists and so on. However, during the night when this young man was alone walking in the streets of Paris, he would bump into people, American people who were in Paris in the 20s. So every night he would meet Hemingway, and not only American, he would meet Dali and Matisse and so on and so forth. So it's a fun time travel movie about the magic of Paris. And this is a very entertaining movie. I would say it's tasteful and entertaining and money-making. People like this movie quite a lot. And Woody Allen, the director and the script writer, he was nominated for several awards, and he received an Oscar for being the playwright of this movie. Okay. And when you look at the cast, you will see some people like Owen Wilson, Rachel Adams, and so on, who played nowadays people, traveler or tourists in Paris. They are current day people. And then you look down, you will see Marion Cotillard, who played a mistress of Picasso, or Tom Hiddleston playing F. Scott Fitzgerald, or this actress playing Zelda, who's the wife of Fitzgerald. And you would also have Corey Stoll playing Hemingway, and Adrian Brody playing Salvador Dali, and Kathy Bates playing Gertrude Stein. All these are famous people of yesterday. They were in a different era, but they were there at the same time. Okay. And the last one is funny because it's a lady playing a museum guide, and he happens to be wife of French President Nicolas Sarkozy. And her name is Carla Bruni. Okay. So it's a very strange cast list of people in the movie. And there are many other people that are playing different famous people, but their roles are very tiny, hardly any, sometimes even not saying a word. And there are people playing these characters: Cole Porter, Josephine Baker, Pablo Picasso, Man Ray, Louis Buñuel, T.S. Eliot, Henri Matisse, and Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, and Paul Gauguin, Edgar Degas. They're in another different era. I mean, some of them, because the time travel, they traveled, Owen Wilson was in this movie, traveling to one era, then he met this Picasso's girlfriend, and they said, we want to go to a different era. So they jump into a few decades before, and it was a different world with some different people. So that's twice time travel, the story. Okay, that's it for that fun movie. The new word is called legacy. Legacy has something to do with heritage. Actually, it means heritage. It's similar to inheritance. However, inheritance is more of a property, money or real estate or something that's passed down from the parents to the children. That's inheritance. But legacy could be more abstract. Maybe they're your parents' teaching, or their thoughts and their activity that inspired people to do something. That's a legacy, which is not money per se. Okay. So in law, when you talk about the legacy, that is like the inheritance. But in the non-legal way, you can use this to describe something that was passed down from a generation to another generation. That's not necessarily a property. For example, there is an example sentence, John Muir left as his legacy an enduring spirit of respect for the environment. John Muir is a naturalist. He traveled to the West, which means our area, or in California and so on. If you go to Mount Rainier and you stand in front of this huge, beautiful mountain, and on the right-hand side, you're looking from the north side of the mountain. You look up, and on the upper right corner, there's a little shed. That is where John Muir used to stay when he went up there. And his legacy is to inspire us to respect for the environment, not as a human that is strong and violent and destroy the nature, but to respect, to live with nature and to enjoy and respect the nature. So that's a heritage we received from John Muir. And if you go to Yosemite National Park, and they have a store and a little museum and so on, they have a lot of things from John Muir. And they also, of course, they have pictures taken by Ansel Adams. Okay, Ansel Adams was a photographer at that time, and he took a lot of pictures of Yosemite, and they were treasured now. So he may not have a lot of money to pass on to people, but his legacy of his beautiful appreciation of nature is what we got. People of this country received from people like John Muir and Ansel Adams. And in education system, the word legacy is used to describe the descendant of an alumnus. So somebody went to a certain school and graduated, and later he became rich and famous, and his son, who may not have as good a grade to pass the admission process, but because the father was rich and famous and was a student in the same school before, and possibly he donated a lot of money to the school, then the son becomes a legacy student. He was able to enter the school because of the legacy from the father. For example, Donald Trump went to Pennsylvania University, probably not because he got good grades or good recommendation, but because his father pulled some strings. He was one of the legacy students. Like George Bush went to Yale because his father was there. Here's a word called collaborate, which is a very good word. You have people, at least two people, working together to finish a project. So this is a good verb describing, usually we say two people, but it can be a group of more than two people. And when you talk about a musical on stage or in the movies, you would have a movie or a stage play that included songs and the lyrics. I mean, the music of the songs and the lyrics. And usually this one person is not talented enough to do both. So you would have two people collaborating in order to create a great musical. So you have Rodgers and Hammerstein, and you have Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe. And you also have Bernstein and Steve, what's the last name? Sondheim, okay, Stephen Sondheim. So when you have a good musical, usually you don't have a single person doing both parts. So you would have two people in collaboration, or two collaborators. So that's a wonderful word to say about people. However, it also has a terrible meaning. It means to collaborate with the enemy. So it's called the Tongdi, or in the Chinese way, we would say Hanjian. That is, this person is a Han person, but he is evil because he is working for the enemy, for example, the Japanese. So you would have a collaborator, which means this person is helping your enemy to do things. Of course, it's not a Chinese specialty. You have collaborators all over, anywhere in the world. When a citizen of one country decided to work for the enemy, you have this word for this person. Okay, for example, we have Vichy regime. This is like Wang Jingwei, when the Japanese came to China and they wanted to hide behind something. For example, Puyi, they got the last emperor of China to be the ruler of Manchuria. He does nothing, but he just let the Japanese use his name. So he is some kind of a collaborator, Hanjian. And then when the Japanese gained more territories in China, occupying probably 2/3 of China, the land is so vast, Puyi, a single person, is not enough to front the whole thing. So the Japanese got Wang Jingwei to front the so-called Wei Zhengquan, the fake government. It's actually controlled by the Japanese. And in France, on the right-hand side, you have the map of France, and the Vichy is right in the middle of it. It used to be a spa and a resort town because it has good spring water, so it's a spa and a resort town in the old days. But when the Nazi Germany came around, they conquered the entire country mostly, and they established a government called the Vichy France, which is stationed in Vichy. They use Vichy as the capital of their puppet regime from 1940 to 1942. So if a person is called the Vichyist, you know that this person collaborated with the Vichy regime. And this word collaboration has a pejorative connotation. So when you use this word, you have the feeling of contempt for this person. You look down upon this person who is a collaborator, okay? And here's a word called the cell. In biology, it's called the 细胞. Everything alive, like a plant or an animal, was built by millions of cells. That's called the 细胞. However, a cell being so tiny a place, it is also used to describe a prison cell. When you put somebody in prison, he occupies one tiny room in the prison, among many other cells. So this one single room in the prison is called a cell, prison cell. And also in the religion, you would have some kind of a system like a church or a monastery, and there would be small rooms for each of the priests to stay in, and that would be a cell, a monastic cell, a small room, hut, or cave. Sometimes it's a cave and prison cell. Okay, and it's it can be used to describe a group of a few people. They work very much together, and they communicate among themselves, but not necessarily with others. And the other people are not easy to penetrate into this little group. So this is called a cell, which is a unit of a clandestine cell system, a penetration resistant form. So-called penetration resistant means that it's hard for others to get through into it. Resistant is hard to get into. Penetration is to be able to pierce through the walls and into something. So a cell could be a unit of people working together secretly or often illegally, like a terrorist group. We call it a terrorist cell. And sometimes in a large company, there is a small group of a few people that are somewhat secretive that can be called a cellular organizational structure. 所以可以叫做小组秘密工作者。Nowadays, we talk about terrorist group all the time, and they have cells. And this is about authoritarian, which means very authoritative. Can't say that. Authority comes from 权威, a person who is the authority means that among others, he has the power to control this organization or to make decisions for others. And if this is a situation with the whole country or a whole community, then this is not a democratic country or entity. It is an authoritarian regime. That's a word. Well, it means that it demands, it requires people to obey this authoritative figure. And he is a dictator, and he can be considered a tyrant. These are all similar words. So what is required of everyone else is to strictly obey this person. So this kind of setup is not a democracy, and it is authoritarian. Here is a 断头台. You can see in this picture, this was used in 1789 to 1821 in Luxembourg. And of course, there are a lot of such things in France during that time. That is when the French was experiencing the revolution, French Revolution. And this was in existence as early as 1210. So it was not invented by anyone in France in the late 18th century. However, there was a doctor who is against capital punishment, 就是死刑, capital 就是 the greatest punishment, meaning 死刑. This doctor, he thought that people were being executed all the time in a very gory manner. He often felt sorry for those people whose heads were chopped up very sloppily. So he somewhat improved on this old contraption, and meaning the knife is in the diagonal shape. This way it would not be hit the neck with a strong resistance. So if you have a slanted knife, and it can slide down and cut off the head in a more easy manner. And besides, when it drops from high above, the momentum of the knife would cut the neck off more easily instead of a man with an X standing right next to it. And when you miss the head, when you miss the neck, the result can be quite terrible. So this doctor improved on this gadget, and later on people used his name as the name for a 断头台. So in Chinese we say 断头台, but in French you call it a guillotine, which does not mean anything close to 断头 or tai, but it means the name of the doctor whose name is guillotine. Where is his name? French. Okay, his name is Guillotine. Okay, so he proposed in 1789. That's the year of the French Revolution started. And so the people usually say he invented the guillotine, but he didn't. He just improved on it. And many people say that he was eventually executed with the guillotine, but he was not. These are all fake news. Okay. The next word is octopus, and we in Chinese we call it 八爪鱼. That is a sea creature with 8 claws. You can see it has 8 in the word because octo means 8. When you say, how come October means the 10th month? That's only because it used to mean the 8th month. You had October, November, December, meaning the 8th and the 9th and the 10th month. However, later on they changed, and the new year was moved from March to January. So all these months becomes 2 months later. The number of the months becomes different, but octo actually means 8. When you have a corner table, sometimes it has 8 corners, 八角桌, so it's called the octagonal table. Okay. And December, of course, is the 12th month now, but it comes from the word deck. So this is a mollusk. It's not a fish, and it's not a crustacean. A crustacean is a 节肢动物, like crab or something that has an entire body was covered with the hard bones. They have bones that are outside their body. That's crustacean. And so octopus is not a fish and not a crustacean, but it's a mollusk, which is 软体动物. Even though some of the mollusks, like the clams and so on, they have hard shell, but their body is soft. They do not have a bone outside or inside, but they do have shells. But they're still called mollusk. There are 300 different kinds of animals that belong to this group, such as octopus, squids, cuttlefish, and the last one I've never heard of. Okay, so all these are similar, and they have long legs, and they have a top, and they have a body, which is usually a tube, and sometimes, well, we'll talk about it in the next slide. Okay, so this kind of animal is bilaterally symmetric, which means it was two-way symmetric. If you draw a line in the middle, then this side is exactly the same as the other side, except it's transposed. It's in the different direction. So you have this thing and this thing, and they are symmetric to the center line, the axle. So that's called the bilaterally symmetric. They have 2 eyes and a beaked mouth. A beaked mouth, it's like a bird the mouth is hard, 角质化的嘴巴 at the center point of the 8 limbs. So they have, an octopus has 8 limbs. 四肢，我们人 human have 4 limbs and they have 8 limbs. Here is a deep sea giant octopus swallowing up a shark or something. And there's a very good documentary movie recently. It's called My Octopus Teacher. It's a person who was diving in South African kelp forest, and he met an octopus and became a friend to this female octopus, and he watched and played with him, and they became friends. That's amazing, you know. And then after a year, this octopus became pregnant and laid lots of eggs and died. It's a sad story, of course. But it's amazing that you could document a love affair between a man and an octopus. And the octopus has so much intelligence in her. And the feelings, you could tell. Yeah, it's a good movie. I'm sure if you have a streaming subscription, you would be able to find this movie. It was quite famous, probably 2 years ago. And when you go to a restaurant or at home, you could encounter as food an octopus or squid or calamari or cuttlefish. And we Chinese eat a lot of different kinds of them. And it's hard to tell them apart. And after you read about it, it's still pretty hard to tell them apart. And when they were sold in the market, sometimes they don't make a difference between one kind and the other. Okay, so they are edible. Every part of them are, nearly every part. You probably would not eat their beaks, which is tiny, but every part else you would eat, including the body, which can be called a hood or a tube or mantle. A mantle is like a 披风, a tube is a 管子, depending on the shape. Sometimes it's flat, sometimes it's a tube. And the hood is like a 包头的帽子, And fin is the parts of the squid that's called the fin is like this, this part here, this triangular part is called the fin, and this is the body or the tube, and these are the legs or tentacles, and here you have the eyes, and the mouth is actually right there in the middle. You have to spread out the legs in order to see the beak. And it says that cuttlefish are the most flavorful, and the calamari is more tender than the squid, and they have longer fins than the squids. This is beyond me. But really, when you have an octopus which has a round head, it doesn't have any fin. But when you have a Yoyu would have fins, okay? And the cuttlefish has cuttle bones. That is a hard, flat, like a water skiing board that's inside their body to support the shape. Otherwise, it would crumble together. This is a cuttlefish bone. And sometimes you would go to the pet store to buy a piece and hang it in your bird cage, and it provides calcium for your little parakeets. And of course, the ink of the uze, of the squid, you can eat that ink as well, even though it's not a solid body part. The ink is delicious. I've had them. You had the 北海道乌贼饭, that's a squid ink stuffed rice into a squid. And in an Italian dish, you have linguine with an ink sauce. It looks quite terrible in that dark color, but it's very expensive, you know. If you order one, you should be prepared to pay a little more than a regular seafood spaghetti or a chicken or meatball one, because squid ink is delicious and expensive. Now let's talk about professional sports. We have in this country big four, NFL, which is National Football League, MLB, which is Major League Baseball, NBA, National Basketball Association, and NHL, National Hockey League. They have different ways to describe their either a league or an association or something. And most of them are called the national because they were not the only league in the past, but now they all merged together to become one. So we're going to talk about the very, very brief history of these leagues. So we have American football, American baseball, and basketball, and hockey, ice hockey. Of these, three originated in this country, but ice hockey league started in Canada and came down here. This is a map of not only the USA, but some southern parts of Canada as well. And each one marked was a big city that has at least one league, a team, at least one team in the national association. Okay, so Seattle, we had this Mariner baseball team, and we have Seahawk. Is that Seahawk as a football team? And now we have the ice hockey. Don't we have basketball? Oh yeah, we lost our basketball team, but we recently gained this hockey league team. And the last time I mentioned, I call it Kraken, but my daughter said it should be called a Kraken, K-R-A. It should be pronounced Kra instead of Kra, okay? Because it's about North European country culture, the mythology of the northern people. So it's pronounced as Kraken. And of course, there are cities that even have more than one of a kind of teams. For example, New York City has 2 baseball teams. So if the population is big enough, then you can support more teams. So you can see that not all the cities in the country has a major league or an important national team in their town. First, we talk about baseball. It's all American. America was the inventor of this sports, and it is world famous as an American kind of sports. And there was the National League in 1876, and then a newer league, American League. And the two, they sort of combined each other. They're still separate in their season annual competition. They were divided into two groups, but in the end, there is a final competition between the two most successful teams, and there will be one winner coming out of it, so that it's more or less two leagues merged into one in the year 2000. And there are currently 30 member teams, of which only one is in Canada. And it was the first professional sport in the United States. It used to be in the community, you play in the park, but then it becomes bigger and bigger. And the Basketball Association, it's a little later than that, or much later, you would say. And they were different association, and later they all merged into one. And there are currently 30 teams, and one of them is in Canada. And it's watched by more than any other game. It is watched by international community. Now, for example, lots of people in China follow NBA games very, very fervently. Football league is only a US kind of sport. It's invented and played by American people only. And this league was started in 1920, and it's absorbed the All-American Football Conference, and so it becomes one big league in 1970, and it has 32 teams, all American teams. And the Americans are just crazy about this sport. I don't know why there could be a sport that's loved as their number one preference, while no one else in the world cares. I don't know, because I don't know about this game at all. I don't know the rules. I don't watch it. Okay, but it is the most watched game in this country, and the Super Bowl is watched. Every year Super Bowl on TV is the most watched program in the whole country. That is just amazing. Okay. Super Bowl. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't watch Super Bowl either. And the last one, the fourth one, is called the National Hockey League. It was founded in Canada in 1917, and now it absorbed many other leagues. There are 32 teams, and 7 in Canada, 25 in the US. So even though it started in Canada, later on, there are more teams in the United States. And the Seattle Kraken joined this league last season. It's the most popular sports league in Canada. So even though they have all kinds of other big games, this is still their best beloved game. And as years go by, there are more and more United States teams joining this league. They moved south because it's ice hockey. It's sports in the north. So some places in the south never see ice on the ground in their lives. But because of the popularity of the game, they started to have teams in the south. And these are other leagues. You don't hear so much about them, but there are still national leagues, such as soccer, which is the big football everywhere else in the world. And cricket is an English kind of a game with a stick. And the lacrosse is you have a kind of a stick with a little net on top, and you can throw your balls using that. And there are team associations for female players only. And there's rugby, which is 橄榄球. And here's a hockey, which is not ice hockey. These are all big national professional leagues. Here's a word called a prefecture. I learned this word only when I use it to describe the provinces in Japan. This is a word from Roman times, but somehow Japanese counties or provinces, they used the word prefecture as a translation. So when you say 州府县郡, it can mean other things. For example, in China, when you say jun, it was in the Qin Shi Huang's time, and later it's no longer used. But we have counties which are much smaller than the provinces, but in Japan, they are called the prefectures. And also it can be in the structure of a religious organization, whether it's international or not. It has all kinds of layers and divisions, and they can use the word prefecture to describe it. And here's a map of Japan. It has 47 level 1 district, and they're called the 都道府县. And the xian is translated into prefecture. And of the 47, 43 are prefectures. Others are metropolitan areas mostly. And this turret is the corner structure of a castle, like this reddish colored part of this castle. And in our Beijing Forbidden City, there are 4 in this shape. They are built at the 4 corners of this whole structure. Let's talk about herbaceous and woody plants. As we translate into Chinese, they are called 草本或者木本. The most obvious thing is peony. You have 牡丹花, which is 木本, that has wooden plants. They have a woody stalk, and in English you would call it a tree peony. And you have 芍药, which is called herbaceous, which we don't use. We just call peony, which means 芍药, but it is herbaceous. And if you have that in your home, you will notice it, because in the winter you can still see the skeleton of a tree peony, but you don't see anything where the peonies are, because it dies down into the ground. So you only have the roots there, or it's more like a yam or like a dahlia. 像个番薯一样, those are the roots of the peony, because it's herbaceous. These are, whether it's 草本 or 木本, they are vascular plants, which means that 它们有导管. At the bottom, you see the Chinese saying 有导管. That means it has vascular. I mean, you have tubes that conduct water and the liquid throughout the body of the plant. That's called 有导管的植物. And 有导管的植物里就有 herbaceous and woody. And when it's woody, it is more persistent. It exists all the time, even though the leaves are shedded. there's still, you can see the tree, the trunks and the branches of the plant there. But if it's herbaceous, you don't see them when it's in winter. But this kind of herbaceous plant, they are divided into different, according to their age. They could be annuals and biennials, or perennials. Perennial 就是 more than 2 years. You call it perennial, 就是多年生. And these are the deer who are eating leaves from the tree. So these animals are herbivores, which means they eat the grass-like things. It could be tree leaves or grass, but they are soft tissues from the plants. And they are this way by nature, and they are built this way to make sure they can eat enough food, because if it's a carnivore, it has to be able to go out and kill animal or to pick up leftover dead animals to eat. So they need the teeth to either kill or to rip the meat out of the bone. However, if it's a herbivore, then this kind of animal don't have sharp teeth, and they have big teeth that can grind up the leaves of the vegetation. So if they have teeth like dogs or lions, they will not be able to chew the leaves fine enough for digestion. From the word herb, which means 草本, I was supposed herb is a 香料 or medical herbs, plants with medicinal property. So from the word herb comes this word called the herbarium. Herbarium means a place where you put the plants, not as a living plants, but after you collect parts of it and dry it up or flatten it so that you could put into a book or something. That's called a herbarium, 植物标本馆. It is a collection of preserved plants, plant specimen. Specimens are a part that represent, that shows what it looks like. It's called a 标本. For scientific study, the specimens may be whole plants or plant parts, and they are usually dried because it does not keep well if it's not dried. And it's usually flattened, so you can put it into a book or into a frames. Specimen are used as reference. So it's very important for scientific research. Without this specimens, it's very hard for you to describe to another person what the thing looks like. For example, Darwin, when Darwin went out on the trip to the Galapagos, among other places, he would collect lots of plants and animals and try to dry them up and categorize them and put them into different containers and so on. That is a biologist's duty, or they would love to have those things to help them do research. And here's a picture I took in Taipei Botanical Garden, and somehow it says 蜡叶馆. When I look for the word herbarium on Wikipedia and I look at their Chinese translation and their Japanese translation, they did not say 蜡叶馆, they just say 植物标本馆. So I don't know why it's called the 蜡叶馆, which I never heard before. And it's in particular, it says since 1924, meaning this was established under Japanese occupation. And of course, it's just looks like other herbarium with lots of things that were flattened and collected. And nowadays, because of internet, you're able to look at collections from many other herbariums in the world. So it's wonderful for your biological research. And my niece in particular, she works at Portland Botanical Garden, and she is in charge of herbariums, and she has a big group of volunteers under her going out into the botanical garden, collecting specimens and process them. Yeah. Once I took the online class and learned from her along with other volunteers how to do this. It's very interesting. I loved it. And this is a big building, looks like a greenhouse, but it's not, huh? And on the side, you can see administration. At the administration, huh? That means it's their office. And at the lower level on the left-hand side, it says herbarium, which means herbarium, okay? This is a herbarium in Medellin, Colombia, and I took this picture 2-3 years ago. And this, I did not take this picture. It is from Wikipedia. It's an aquarium. When it's at home, we call it 水族箱. But when it's in the big aquarium, it can be huge. It can be over the top. You can be walking through a tunnel with this aquarium all over around you. I've been to many of the aquariums in the world, and some are really, really big. Here is the so-called biggest indoor aquarium in the world, and it's in Dubai Mall. Dubai is a city on the tip of the Arabia Peninsula, and they are so rich that they have big things in their shopping mall, like this one, which is an aquarium, and they also have ski slopes and the ice skating rinks right there in the same shopping mall. This is more than a 2-story high. And this is our very own Seattle Aquarium. In the year 1977, I came to visit my mother. And at that time, this aquarium just opened. The first year, the new aquarium opened. Now they're talking about building a bigger one than this. It's a lovely place, but it's not as huge as, for example, the one in, not Florence, in Oregon. What's in that? I forgot. Okay. Words are hard to come by nowadays to me. You have along the coast of Oregon, you have Florence, and it's not Newcastle, Newport. Okay, Newport, Oregon. Yes, they have a bigger aquarium. And in the similar scale and the concept, you have boxes that keeps plants or even animals inside, but no water. So this is called a terrarium. Terra means land or soil. Terrarium is a box, usually clear, so you can see inside. And it's usually closed, like the one on the right-hand side. It almost looks exactly like that aquarium we saw a little earlier, but it has no water in it. So it can have plants inside and some smaller animals, maybe not elephants and tigers, but you can put insects or birds or rabbits or snakes, smaller animals in it. So it can be like this and called a terrarium. And another word is called a vivarium, which means anything live you can put in the box. So it mainly included all the aquariums, terrarium, and so on. It's a place of life, and it could be alive. Yes, they are alive. It's not a herbarium, which is only for dead plants. So you can raise animals or plants for observation or research in an area which is usually enclosed. And they may mimic some kind of ecosystem. For example, it could be hotter than the surrounding place, or it could be more moist, or any. So it's a climate controlled contraption. When we say contraption, we just mean some kind of rigged with a place with some special arrangement. Contraption. I think it's like this. No, it doesn't look like that. Maybe it's like this. Okay. So when we want to say something, we just say contraption. Okay. So a vivarium could be anything, even a lot more than what I listed here. There are aquariums, oceanariums, which means a much bigger aquarium, dolphinarium that keeps dolphins, aviary, which means a big tent-like web thing with the birds inside. 鸟园, fish pond or koi pond. Koi is a kind of fish, 锦鲤, greenhouse. A fancy name for greenhouse is conservatory because it preserves something special. Nocturnal house, which means that it keeps animals that are active in the night. So you would darken the surroundings so that they would come out to do something. Some snakes are nocturnal. If you go to a zoo, maybe they have an area with darkened rooms that they keep the nocturnal animals. Penguinarium, keeping penguins inside. Terrarium. Serpentarium keeps snakes in there. Insectarium keeps insects there. Ant farm, we call it an ant farm. That is, you keep a group of ants with different responsibility, like the queen or the workers and so on. Bottle garden is just like an aquarium, but it's shaped like a bottle. People somehow like to put things in a bottle because of the difficulty of taking it in or out. And of all such vivarium, this one beats them all, I would say. It's Amazon spheres in downtown Seattle. They built this beautiful structure with 3 globes connected, and it's free. But you need to get a ticket online. Then maybe a month or 2 from today, then you will be able to get in. That's very interesting. And I was able to get in because my sister reserved the ticket for me. It was lots of things happened right before the pandemic, when I look at it. And these are a few things, the pictures I took inside that Amazon sphere. If you live around here, make sure you try to take a look there. It's fantastic. Okay. And when we talk about those plants, whether woody or herbaceous. You talk about annual, which is finish a life cycle in 1 year or 2 years. Biennial or many would last more than 1 year. So this life cycle would go around and around and continue with time. Of course, these words do not necessarily mean the plants. It can mean an annual meeting or a biannual festival or something else. But here we use those words in the meaning that it's describing type of plants. For example, an annual plant is a plant that completes its life cycle from germination to the production of seeds. So when it was a seed, then it grows big and the flower and the bear fruit or seeds. That's one full cycle. If it's finished in 1 year, then it's done. It's called an annual plant and it dies. However, there are things that people plant as an annual. If you grow them in hotter area, they can become perennial. For example, tomatoes, potatoes, cabbages, peppers, all these are annuals in our area. But if you go to a warmer place, they can live long for years and years to come. For example, in Shitoshan, they have a 朝天椒, a pepper, super hot pepper plant that lasted like 50 years at least now. It was like 20 or 30 years old when I was young. So it could be 100 years old. Yeah. So a pepper plant can, which we think is an annual plant, it can live for years as long as it does not freeze to death. And there are two types of annuals. If you start to plant it in spring and you harvest in the fall, that's called a summer annual. But if you plant in winter and you harvest next spring or summer, then it's a winter annual. Famously, you have winter wheat and spring wheat. If you plant spring wheat, 麦子, then you get it in the fall. It becomes yellow all over the place. But if you spread the seed before winter comes, and it'll grow and you can harvest in spring or summer. So that's a 冬麦. And like 蚕豆 or garlic, fava beans and garlic, you plant them after summer and you harvest before next summer. So the life cycle goes through is less than 12 months. That's an annual, but this kind is called the winter annual. And biennial is that you see them, you plant them this year, but they do not mature this year. So next year comes and they will bloom and bear seeds. That's called the biennial. And that is about a plant. If you're not talking about the plant, if you're talking about a festival, then it can be a biennial festival. And there are a lot of European art festivals that are biennial, like Venice biennial or Berlin biennial. That's when you say it in English. But what they use in their poster, they use the Italian word, which is biennale. Okay. And there's also this word called biennial, which means twice a year, whether a plant can be planted twice in a year or a kind of meeting or festival that is held twice a year. You can use this word biennual instead of biennial. And you can have a kind of plant that bears fruit every other year. So it would have fruit 1 year and next year there is no fruit. And then on the third year, they'll they'll be blooming and fruiting on the third year too. That's called the biennial bearing trees. Perennial is, many years. So it's used in many other situations. For example, a perennial starlet meaning this actress is always a small star, never a big time. Or you can say through the years, a stream, a creek, 一条小溪, it is a perennial creek, which means it's always there all every year. Unlike some creeks that gets dried in the summer and disappears. Okay, so it could be a perennial perennial creek, which the word can also mean through the years. Okay. And here's the word we talked about last time. It's decennial. Okay, decennial, which comes from the word 10. 10 is like December. This is once every 10 years. We used this word last time when AFI, which is American Film Institute, they would revise their best 100 movie every 10 years. So every 10 years, they would strike out a few and put in a few new ones they picked. Okay. Actually, the first time they picked the best 100 movies, some of them are terribly bad. And over the years, those were gone. You hope so. Okay. It can also mean the 10th anniversary of something, called the decennial. Here we have the word smuggle, which means to import or export something illegally, whether it's a banned substance, so you don't want the police to catch you, or you want to avoid paying duties, so you secretly ship it without letting people know. That's called a smuggle. But the extended meaning could be having nothing to do with import, export, or the law. It could be you just secretly do something. For example, you bring a cigarette into the office, that you would do it secretly. Okay. Disenfranchise, this word we talked about a while ago. So if you are McDonald's, you would give people the right to open a new McDonald's somewhere else. So you give them the franchise, so they have the right to use your product, your name, and your process, and to have a store. And the disenfranchise, meaning your regular rights were taken away or never given to you. For example, if you were a Black or a woman, then in the beginning, you did not have voting right, or you don't have the right to, for example, drive or do things, then you were disenfranchised. That's how it's used. This is just a simple verb, which means to cut it sharply or resolutely. And it's more dramatic than cut, sever. And consort is the spouse of a king or a queen. So if a spouse of a king, then it's we call the queen. However, if it's a spouse of a queen, then we don't call him a king, because the queen is a ruler and the husband is not. So we would call that husband a consort. And of course, if there's a king, there are many consorts, not just one. So not every one of them can be called a queen. They are called consorts. So you have Prince Philip, who is a consort of Queen Elizabeth II, and you have Prince Albert, who is a consort of Queen Victoria. Oh, my God. quasi or quasi, or yeah, I usually say quasi, which means look similar but not the real thing. However, pseudo is not a real thing, but it's a fake, which means it's not the real thing. I think fossil is the last one. It's 化石, huh? It can be something from very old times, and it can also be not a thing, but an impression, which, for example, a footprint of an ancient person, that can also be a fossil, or trace or something. Okay, so mainly we consider fossil as something, some object that was preserved from ancient times, but it may not even be a thing. So it can be bones or skeletons or stones, or stone imprints of animals or microbes. For example, in the sand, you have an insect living there for years ago, and now the insect is gone, and the stone is left with the shape of the previous insect. It can be petrified, so the shape is changed or substance is changed, like oil and coal. These are changed, no longer what they used to be. And the DNA remnants. Okay. This is a piece of amber hupo, with a dead insect in it, because the insect was walking by the tree and the drop of the resin fell on it and then dries up. So you see a piece of amber with a dead animal in it. Okay. So these things are called inclusions in the hupo, in the amber. A resin is for example, a pine tree dripping sap. That's a sticky, and then this sap 就是树的枝 cover something and then dries up. So this insect is trapped inside. I was in Estonia, and their stores were full of amber trinkets, necklace and pendants, things like that, jewelry made of amber. And this is I was in St. Petersburg. In the suburb, there is the Palace of the Queen, and there is one single room entirely decorated with amber. This is called an amber room. Last time we talked about petrified wood, we have lots of pictures. These are local. You can go on I-90 to Vantage, and there is the Petrified Forest State Park. All these you can see there. Okay, that is when there's a volcano eruption, there was lava and water and lots of things cover the trees, and the trees are dead, but they were underwater, so they do not rot. And slowly the water with the lime inside came through the cells of the wood, and they fill each cell with mineral, usually quartz or opal. And the original living structures, cells and so on, they were not rotten, but they were just filled with stone minerals. So these are called the petrified wood, and it can be lots of trees in that shape or form. Okay, and we have a fossil fuel that is similarly, after some kind of earth movement, you have large tracts of trees or animals buried underground, and after millions of years, it becomes a crude oil or coal or natural gas. This is in Azerbaijan in 2019, and you would be able to extract the oil or natural gas from it. Okay, let's rush on to bookends. Okay, let's play this. Let me see if I can stop share. I hope I can see it here. Okay.
Old friends, sat on a park bench like bookends, a newspaper blown through the grass falls on the round toes of the high shoes of the old friend. Old friends, winter companions, the old men, lost in their overcoats, waiting for the sun. The sounds of the city sifting through trees settles like dust on the shoulders of the old friends. Can you imagine us years from today, sharing a park bench quietly? How terribly strange to be 70. Old friends, memory brushes the same years, silently sharing the same fear. Time it was, and what a time it was. It was a time of innocence, a time of confidences. Long ago it must be, I have a photograph. Preserve your memories, they're all that's left you.
It's hard to believe that Mint Mobile can be good at just 50.
Okay. So this is a song called Old Friends, but it's part of Bookends. Bookend is an album which includes, of course, several songs, but in the beginning it has bookend, and at the end there is the same thing, bookend. It's like a shoe. When you put books on the bookshelf, you have two bookends squeezing all the books together. There are two ends of it. And it's about a person's life from growing up and getting bigger and getting older. So it's a story about a person's life, not necessarily one person, but just about human life. Because we're short of time, I guess there's not much to go over here. It is a short song by Simon and Garfunkel, and it's a little different from other songs. Sometimes people write a song, they just sit down and write a song. But Simon, in this case, he decided to write many songs, a series of songs that makes up one theme, which is the human life experience. And this is toward the end of it, the last song. So at the end of this song, you have the bookend that comes at the end. They were both born in 1941, and this album was released in 68. So when they were like 27, actually it was toward the later part of their collaboration together. So even though they were young, it was not the work of their younger ages. Ooh, that is terrible. I'm sorry. So they actually created 5 albums, and this is the 4th one, and last one was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And people generally think that the last 2 were better than the earlier ones. So side 1 is all the books here, all the songs here, from 1 to 7, and side 2 are some miscellaneous songs. So on the side 1, you have the bookend theme, and going through 5 songs, and then at the end is the bookend theme at the end. And the song we heard, Old Friend, is the 6th one. Once you understand how it was constructed, you feel that it's kind of unusual for 2 people not yet 30 years old to think about life through the different stages in life and have feelings, imagining having different feelings throughout the life. So it's kind of unusual, but they think they were also inspired by the way Bob Dylan writes songs, because he does not just write one thing about something. He thinks about the whole life and has more depth to the songs. Okay, and then this is a poem that Liu Yuxi wrote after he received this poem from Bai Juyi. So Bai Juyi wrote this poem, which is complaining about his old age. You and I were about the similar age. Actually, they were born in the same year. Okay, and all kinds of medical problems came up. So you have 干眼症, because your eyes are not good, so you have to go to bed early, and you're kind of lazy, and you did not even comb your hair in the morning, and you carry a stick with you because you could not walk very well, and you stay at home, not going out, and you don't look at the mirror, and you don't read books with small characters, and people that you often go out or meet together when you were young no longer visit each other. So he's just complaining about his life. However, Liu Yuxi, at the same age, experiencing the same thing, expressed sympathy for this, and he also has all these problems, but he is optimistic about life. He still thinks there's more to life than you think. 人谁不顾老，老去有谁怜? Okay, and when you're so skinny, you have to adjust your belt all the time, using less and less of the belt, and you have so little hair that you cannot hold your head squarely on top of your head, and you hardly read books because you're straining your eyes, and you're often burning, they say 艾草, like my father used to do, because when you get older, your knees are not so good, so you need to put a slice of ginger on top with some dried teacher would say flea bang. Okay, but I call it Artemisia. It's just a kind of a Chinese herb, You chop it up and it's dried, of course, and you burn it on top to make your joints move better. And you experience so many things, and you know things, you know how to handle things already. So it's getting to be to the brighter side, even though you have all these problems, but because of your old age, you have these advantages too. And your thinking is more thorough, and so you can be cheerful. And the most famous two lines are the last two. 莫道桑榆晚，微霞尚满天。桑榆means the trees that most farmers have around their house. They are mulberry trees and elm trees. And when you mention these trees, it means the sun is setting so low that the light you see from the sun came through these trees. That means your old age. This is time for the sun to set. But even though the sunlight is coming through these trees late in the day, you can still enjoy bright clouds, colorful clouds in the sky. 微霞尚满天. So these are very optimistic and sympathetic words for people getting worse. Nowadays we say 桑榆之年, which means you're at the stage in your life that's like the sun shining through the low trees. Okay. I have a few others that I don't have to. These are some other poems they write to each other. They were good friends for many, many years. And the most famous Liu Yuxi poem is 朱雀桥边野草花，乌衣巷口夕阳下，旧时王谢堂前燕，飞入寻常百姓家。And when we were in middle school, I did read Liu Yuxi的陋室铭山不在高，有仙则名；水不在深，有龙则灵。斯是陋室，惟吾德馨。Even though it's a dilapidated house room, but because of my virtues, it's filled the rooms with fragrance. 苔痕上阶绿，草色入帘青. Suddenly he changed from four words to 5 words. It's very skillful, and even lines with different length. 谈笑有鸿儒，往来无白丁. Even though I'm a poor guy, but when people come to visit, they are great scholars, very respected, and not a single person cannot read, which is rare. Okay. 可以调素琴，阅金经，无丝竹之乱耳，无案牍之劳形。南阳诸葛庐，西蜀子云亭。孔子云：“何陋之有？” It's very short, but you probably can tell that he is full of knowledge, experience, and talent, but was not well recognized. So he is happy by himself, not being rich and famous or in high position. That's the last one, but I'd like to remind you the movie is called The Best Years of Our Lives. Do you have any questions today or comments?
Joe, that talking about Randolph Hearst, didn't he have a daughter or granddaughter that joined the?
Yes, his granddaughter is Patty Hearst.
Right.
Yeah.
That was quite a news that time. I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
And later on, she married a guard.
Married, right?
Yeah, a person who was watching over her.
Yeah.
And then she became a writer and a movie actress.
Oh,
she was in some movies. I've never seen her though.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's it, we'll call it a day. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you，
谢谢老师，谢谢
玉姐
老师。
下次见，拜拜。
别揪哦。
Uh-huh. Okay.